Welcome to the Stormsurf video surf forecast for the week starting Sunday, October 4th. Looking at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean, we see not a whole lot going on, but a better pattern than in weeks past. Tropical system, Choi Wan, over in the far West Pacific, and then some other form of low pressure trying to generate something here north of Hawaii. Also, pressure gradient off California generating seas pushing south, but that is already dissipating. And then there's tropical activity south of Hawaii. Let's dive into the details. First, tropical system, Choi Wan, off of Japan here. Tropical storm only, 55-knot winds. Here's its path where it's been. Here's where it's projected to go. Not favorable for swell development relative to California and Hawaii. Basically taking a beeline up into off of Kamchatka here and over the Kuril Islands. Supposed to get landlocked here and never venture west of that area. Winds barely making it into hurricane force or typhoon force in the West Pacific, and not a whole lot more. The issue is there's high pressure here, and we'll get into that in a minute when we start talking jet stream charts. Also, tropical storm Oho, south of the Big Island, Hawaii. Minimal system, 35-knot winds, basically a depression. Forecast to build 55 knots. Tracking fairly quick off to the north-northeast over the next coming days. Maybe good for some swell for the Big Island, but that's about it. And we'll discuss why this one is taking the path it's taking as well. First up, let's talk about jet stream level winds. These winds, up about 30,000 feet, help support the formation of storms, and when those storms or gales form, also helps direct their path. The situation has improved significantly in the past week, and this is exactly what we were hoping for. Still not, off the charts good or anything, but getting better. Consolidated jet now pushing off of Japan, ridging, that is up here to the north, making a bow. This would support clockwise circulation, high pressure down at the surface. But look at this. Currently, a trough dug out in the Gulf of Alaska, and a pretty well-defined trough with a good amount of winds here, 120-knot winds falling down into it. This trough up at the upper levels would support counterclockwise circulation, and also down at the surface, that would mean low pressure in this area. And then a ridge off of California here, again, another high pressure area. This would be pretty standard for this time of year. Blocking ridge, preventing storms from working their way into the coast. Also notice this, a little backdoor trough here. It actually went over north and central California yesterday, generated a good amount of fetch. There was a solid 15 feet at 10-second seas off of the San Francisco area at one point yesterday, with pretty strong north winds associated with it too. Anyway, maybe just bringing a little hint of coolness to the air. Anyway, let's put this into motion. The trough continues in the Gulf. If anything, it only builds as more wind here, 170-knot winds start pushing into it on Tuesday night into Wednesday. Look, it's just a persistent trough. Look at that. Pretty big ridge here, well dug out trough. This is looking very El Nino-ish like. This is exactly what you'd want to see if you were in a El Nino year. And look at that, still solid, very solid. 170-knot winds into Friday. And then we just roll this out. The trough holds. Now this is even, and basically the pattern, it looks like it's getting ready to do the same thing yet again, only the trough moving a little bit more towards the date line on Sunday night, Monday. So, and notice, all consolidated, a little bit of a split here, but coming in off of Asia, all consolidated. This is the typical El Nino kind of signature. Solid consolidated flow off Japan, pretty much just barreling right across the North Pacific. So, in the upper levels of the atmosphere, things are looking pretty good. Next, we go down to the surface. Surface level pressure, surface level winds. Differences in pressure between high pressure and low pressure creates winds, and winds, of course, create seas, and seas, as they rotate away from the fetch area, generate swell, and swell, when it reaches our beach, creates surf. Anyway, so here we go. Choi Wan off of Japan here. We see it pretty well defined. We also see Oho down here, south of Hawaii. We also see a tropical system here. They're keeping their eyes on this. It might even be a depression. Another little area of low pressure here. Here's the other thing to see, and it's not real clear here, but west winds, look at this, going from north of New Guinea the whole way to a point almost south of Hawaii. And these are west winds, not anomalies, actual west winds. We'll get into that in a minute. Anyway, so here we go. Let's just watch our storms. And we expect this guy to go off this way. We expect this guy to go off this way. And then low pressure here in the Gulf. Let's see what happens. I mean, it's just meandering. This is actually a low pressure system that generated swell that hit Hawaii on, what was it, Friday and Saturday. It's still lingering, supported by the jet. Anyway, Choi Wan looking impressive, but going the wrong way. But look at this large area of low pressure here. Now, you think that's going to have some effect on these tropical systems down here? Absolutely. They're going to get drawn right up into it, but also get sheared. So here we go. We're into Friday. There is this fetch of 40, almost 45 knot winds. The great circle paths coming into California are about like this. That almost might, if it can get some traction, just looking at here, watch the swing from Hawaii towards California. It's very quick, in like 12 hours, and then it's gone, and everything's really going. And watch this guy here. He just gets sucked up into it. And that's kind of the end of that. They get sheared. We're 162 hours out, 180 hours out. Low pressure continues. So one would have hoped that this system would get better purchase on the ocean surface and generate more fetch than it did, but it hasn't. Again, this sort of speaks to this El Nino situation we got going on. Our El Nino is strong, but it's just taking its sweet time getting its act together. It's a slow bloomer. You know, that's what happened in the 82, 83 El Nino. That doesn't mean that all heck's not going to cut loose at some time. It's just not happening immediately, unlike the 97 El Nino, which was strong right off the bat. And then finally, the effects of those winds on the ocean surface. Remember, the wave model is actually a model of a model. It takes winds or wind forecasts from the atmospheric models and then projects the effect of those winds on the ocean surface to give you like sea heights here and swell period and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so Choi Wan, 32-foot seas projected here, but going in the wrong direction, all targeting Hawaii. Here's our other little system down here, Oho. And notice the fetch is mainly all over here on the east side of the storm. Maybe a little bit of energy pushing back at Hawaii, but not a whole lot. Then we start watching our low here up in the Gulf. And on Thursday, late Thursday into Friday, it generates seas. But notice this. They're all sort of aimed off to the northeast. Here's another way to look at it. Great circle paths overlaid. We'll just do this. Boom, boom, boom. And look at that. The great circle paths are going this way. Winds and seas need to be pushing down these lines. Instead, they're going perpendicular. We suspect, maybe a little bit. It might be possible to get some 12 or 13 second period swell in here. Sideband energy from more back in here in the fetch. Because that persists for a little bit into here, and I'm sort of looking at this as we do it. So it's possible, yes, there could be swell, but anyway, not a whole lot expected. And then we come back to this chart. We'll just roll through this. Again, all the energy basically focusing on northern Canada and Alaska. Tropical systems here, a little bit of sideband swell possible from that as well. And then this, this far out, who knows how accurate any of this is, but it suggests that there's certainly a plethora of minor fetches in the Gulf forecast. Good for swell, certainly better, relative mainly to California, not so much for Hawaii. Certainly better than what we've had, which has just been basically wind swell and nothing legit of any indication from fall or winter at this point in time. So we'll take whatever we can get. So mildly encouraging. And then, of course, we need to check out the southern hemisphere. It was all but dead, but for whatever reason, it has decided to wake up too. And we're actually going back in time, almost a week ago, Monday of last week. Let's just put this into motion here. And one small system pushed under New Zealand was at 32, 34-foot seas for just a day or two. That's good for a pulse of energy into Tahiti, Hawaii, and the U.S. West Coast. We're talking 1.5 feet, 2 foot at, 16 seconds or so. A stronger system then developed last Wednesday, 40-foot seas, but notice very small area, and most of the energy all traveling off to the east. Again, another 2 foot at maybe 19 to 20 second period system. And then behind that, over this past weekend, notice this, a little bit stronger system. In fact, actually much stronger. Look at that. 55-foot seas, and this is in the swell window for California and Tahiti, but Hawaii blocked by New Zealand at the peak of this system. We'll roll this out here, and then it's already still pretty solid 48-foot seas into Saturday afternoon, and then faded out this morning and is pretty much gone. But that should be good for a pretty good pulse of swell for pretty much all locations. And let's just examine this closer on this tool. So here we go. This was a Friday into Friday night. That's pretty much where it peaked out relative to Northern California. You can see here is the cutoff, the 221 cutoff for New Zealand, just barely south of that. So that's 220 degrees into Northern California. Also about 221 or so for Southern California, and not shadowed by Tahiti. Relative to Hawaii, definitely blocked here, but if you actually go back, look at that. When it was back here, now most of the energy is pushing perpendicular to the Great Circle Pass, but when it's back here in between Tasmania and New Zealand, some energy is possible radiating towards Hawaii. Anyway, we'll roll this out, and then it continued to about there, and again, relative to California, what's that? Northern California, about 213, 214, again unshadowed. Relative to Southern California, about 215 or so, and in the shadow. And then for Hawaii, definitely in the window. We'll actually go back. It started on, when was that? Saturday. So anyway, and then it fades out from there. So another good pulse, reasonably good pulse of swell is to be expected. And yet one more view. This is with the Jason 2 satellite data overlaid. One pass here. This was on 0Z Saturday, so that'd be Friday night. Looks like about 40... Yeah, looking at the model here, roughly 46-foot seas. Jason 2 said the average was 39.6 with one reading to 43, so a little bit underwhelming at that one. And then we got one more pass over here. Now we get, again, 46-foot seas roughly right here. But Jason 2 is saying the average top 15 measurements averaged out at, and that's a continuous run of 15 measurements at 50 feet with a individual reading, a singular reading to 57.9. So this is even better than what the model suggests and a little bit further south than what the model suggests, which is actually a good thing, which suggests that it's more in the window, the swell window, to all locations than what the model suggests. And then we run out from there and there was no more satellite. And then finally, let's take a look at the forecast and see how this plays out. We'll just roll this out. We're into Monday. Again, still fragments of energy pushing here under New Zealand. With El Nino in play, the New Zealand swell corridor always is where the action is. High pressure sets up over here. Low pressure rotates under it and then up and along the New Zealand coast. And and we'll keep going here. And so we are into Thursday and another little system there. What is that? By Friday, 30. So that, that's good for maybe 17 or 18 second period swell. So again, the southern hemi has not given up, and here we are in October. I mean, a little bit of a late pulse, not bad. I mean, not unusual, but just sort of speaks to the whole weather system, or the whole seasonal change seems to be shifted off almost a month to the right. It seems more like September, early September, than October, just based on looking at the charts. If you didn't look at the dates, didn't look at any of this, and we were eyeballing it, just having done this for years, the expectation is this is an early September pattern, not an early October pattern. All right, let's get into it. The El Nino situation for this year. Let's dive into the details, see how things are going, but we'll give you a little bit of a spoiler right off the bat. The situation has improved. So we're going to do this as we have in weeks past. First, we're going to talk about westerly winds, or what's going on in the Kelvin wave generation area in the west equatorial Pacific, because westerly winds in this area help create or help push warm water in this area to the east in the form of a Kelvin wave. That is warm water that falls to depth, travels under the equator, and then eventually reaches the Galapagos Islands, breaches the surface, creates a warm pocket there, and that, over time, eventually impacts the atmosphere above it, and that, when that happens, it starts affecting the jet stream, and then in the fall and winter months, helps support storm development, making them stronger, more frequent, and more intense. All right, so here we are, Kelvin wave generation area proper. The 3 north, 3 south delineation between about 135 and the date line. You could actually go over to 170. And we've just updated this chart. It hasn't posted yet, but really, most folks tend to go up to 5 north and 5 south. So you just have to use your imagination for this go round. But if you go to the site and check out the models, the very next run of the model will have a line both to the north and south, and will continue, but this is the more conservative view. Anyway, so what we're looking for is westerly winds. We see a little pocket here, but notice very large areas, strong westerly winds, but up at 9 north, and even at 5 north here, it's limited westerly winds. But enough talking, let's just get to it. As we put this into motion, see what happens here. We have westerly winds in the 5 region. We have westerly winds here, and we're talking not just little old westerly winds, we're talking almost 20 knot westerly winds here, and this is by Tuesday. Roll this out again, westerly winds way to the north, but at 5 north here, that's the delineation we're looking for. Looking pretty good, and then you get into, look at this, by Thursday, if this is the critical line right here, you got a nonstop fetch the entire length of the Kelvin wave generation area of up to, what is that, about 18 to 20 knot westerly winds, and this is on Thursday night, and look at this, it just goes and goes and goes, looking very solid and falling further south too, better into the Kelvin wave generation area, and just holding. That's almost, what is that, about 4 to 5 days worth of westerly winds at a good clip. This is a very good sign. This suggests that yet another Kelvin wave number 4, could be in the making if one is to believe the models. So here's another way to look at it. Current situation. This one goes up to 10 north, 10 south, but 5 is the critical line for generating Kelvin waves. Anyway, actual winds, you can see westerly winds indicated on this chart too, just a small area here around the date line, but anomalies, differences in normal for this time of year, for this location, clearly defines strong, these size arrows are what we would call strong westerly anomalies, and that's good enough. All you need is anomalies, and if we looked in the other chart, you'd see the winds are actually pretty much dead down in here. That's the same as westerly anomalies, okay? That will start, because normally you have trades blowing here from the east. Now we're in the reverse of that. Okay, classic El Nino, mature El Nino situation. Anyway, so right now, westerly winds in play. Here's yet another way. This is up at 850 millibars, about 4,500 feet up, but a good proxy for what's going on at the surface. Again, here's the equator. Here's the area right here from about 130 to about 170. Draw a box there in your mind. And this is going back in time, September 28th, and it's daily. You can see the area of westerly winds, westerly wind burst here, just building the 30th, the 1st, the 2nd, okay, and you notice the plethora of tropical activity that's going on in the northern hemisphere. Classic, you get a westerly wind burst like this, it sets up little eddies of counterclockwise circulation, and boom, you just get a string of typhoons or hurricanes that'll form. All this focused on the central Pacific. Very good sign. This is what we've been waiting for. The point being is that, you know, El Nino it's been going along pretty good, but it's not been overwhelming. It's not like, oh my gosh, look at that. And that's really what you want to see if a super El Nino is to be developing. You want to be going, this is serious, this is solid. Well, we finally believe we are starting to get that event to happen. And now, perfectly in the October, typically the fall transition is when all the crazy stuff starts happening. Fall, October, November, December, and right on cue, boom, we get our westerly wind burst. This is a good sign. We've seen this chart before, 850 millibar zonal winds. Okay, you can draw a line roughly from about here over to here, and that's the Kelvin wave generation area. Reds, orange, yellows are westerly anomalies. If you get the dark reds and the purples, that is typically not anomalies, but out-and-out westerly winds. So, of course, looking back in September, we've had this consistent pattern, not super impressive or anything, but just consistent westerly winds, maintenance level winds is what we'd call it. But here we go. Here's where things started getting interesting just in the past day, up just north end of the Kelvin wave generation area. And here's where the forecast starts. Westerly wind burst developing. Forecast good for the next, 3+ days? And then yet more developing behind that into October 9th or so. A legitimate westerly wind burst on, again, what is that? 4, 5, 7 days in duration, at least per this chart, and right where you'd want it to be in the heart of the Kelvin wave generation area. And we've been through this chart before, too. Looking back in time, the big westerly wind burst, it's faded off here. It was really up here in the late June, early July time frame. Equatorial Rossby wave enhanced El Nino base state, and that created a good amount of westerly winds, created Kelvin wave number 3, which is erupting now. We'll get into that in a minute. Now we've been going through this kind of, I'll call it a dead spell. It pretty much started about the middle of August, and it's just been, there's been activity, but nothing to really get us to go, wow, this is solid, And if you have a super El Nino, like I said, you want something that's going to knock your socks off. Well, it appears that is happening now. The active phase, or a very weak pulse of the active phase of the MJO, is supposedly occurring. That's what this black dark line here suggests. Also notice this, equatorial Rossby wave interacting with it starting about a week from now. Whatever westerly anomalies we have now and we're kind of excited about, apparently that is going to be nothing compared to what's coming a week beyond that, and 2 weeks beyond that, almost 3 weeks out, a major westerly wind burst forecast. This would be, if it were to occur, if you were to believe the CFS model that goes out 3 weeks, and actually this model has not done horribly bad. Either way, a little bit of hype here. Maybe Kelvin wave number 4 will be generated, and that would be a very good thing. That would give this El Nino some serious legs. All right, we've seen this chart before. Now, different than the others, history is down here at the bottom. The forecast is at the top. Orange and yellows again, westerly anomalies, Kelvin wave generation area, basically here to up about here. So you can see all our past westerly anomalies. Here was the big westerly wind burst in June, July that created Kelvin wave number 3, massive Kelvin wave number 3 that is currently hitting. And here, if you look at this guy, here is a major projected Kelvin or westerly wind burst, looking very similar to this one, if not bigger in terms of duration, maybe not quite as intense, but solid and well-placed just west of the dateline. Anyway, so we'll put this out in, and of course, as expected, here's MJO activity, right as we would expect, MJO here. Now notice this, a inactive pulse of the MJO forecast starting, what is that, about first week in November up into December, and then in December, another active pulse of the MJO is forecast. Let's add some equatorial Rossby wave activity, and here you get a pulse here and also a little bit of a pulse here, but most of these westerly winds here seem to be basically the base state, El Nino base state, and some equatorial Rossby wave enhancement. Okay, we'll take all that stuff out because it gets quite busy. We'll add, whoops, we didn't want to do that. We'll add the low pass, and this just gives you the sense of where El Nino is. This is the core El Nino, and notice as you get even past here, El Nino per into January is still holding pretty much on the dateline. It's forecast easing to the east, and that's what you would expect. These westerly winds at some point are going to start not racing, but make a trend to the east and collapse over Ecuador, and then it's all over. But according to this, even into the first week in January, we're still in a pretty good situation. And that would be about what we'd expect given the character of this El Nino. It's been slow and moving. It tried to get going in 2014. It couldn't get its act together, but it pushed, we got some warm water out of it. And all this year, it's been 1 step forward, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and it's continuing and continuing. But those are all signs of a a long-lasting El Nino, not a flash in the pan, not a quick I'm in, I blow up, and then I'm gone. No, this guy might hang around for a while. At least that's what its character looks like based on the way it's been acting to date and the way the models are projecting it. This is a good thing. All right, so enough about westerly winds. We see that the forecast is quite good. We see we've had a lot of westerly anomalies, if not out-and-out westerly winds. Westerly winds, of course, push warm water to the east on the equator, so let's see what the effects of past westerly winds have been. Clearly, warm water that's normally all buried over on this end of the graph, here's the West Pacific, here's the East Pacific, is surging off to the east. 29-degree isotherm right here, good pocket, 30 degrees is now back on the picture up towards the surface here. All this warm water moving off to the east. The 28-degree isotherm still has this little buckle in it. We want to see this thing start to go this way. When that happens, that suggests to us that El Nino is making its final push. But, we've also had some issues here with warm water trying to make it into the Galapagos. We won't get into too much of that now. This sort of paints the picture of why. It hasn't made it for whatever reason, mainly because there's probably strong trades at the surface here, and it's kind of fighting a headwind. The last vestiges of the inactive phase of the PDO, perhaps, or just a long-running, the atmosphere is still ground in a bit from years of previous La Niñas, or maybe the character of this El Nino is just a bit westward displaced. It doesn't really matter, though. Anyway, subsurface. Here's where the things are interesting. Here is our Kelvin wave number 3, created by west winds that blew back here in June, July, created warm water, pushed it to depth, and it's all piled up here. There was a pocket of 7 degrees anomalies. We still think it's probably there, but it doesn't show in this chart. Anyway, this is a good, large Kelvin wave. We believe it's finally starting to erupt. It's been just, again, like anything on this El Nino, just taking its time, just in fits and starts. And anyway, it's making progress. We'll just go down here through the chart. So here's the more detailed version of it. Westerly winds here. Clearly we can see warm water still falling to depth here. Here's our pocket, 6-degree anomalies here, here, and here, and much warmer anomalies. The eruption points here at roughly, about 105 and 95, and probably other points along here. And now finally, the leading edge of this guy here, this is the Ecuador coast right here. It is finally starting to make headway here. There's been cool pockets and just, basically a barrier right here. So this guy's been trying to erupt here west of the Galapagos. It looks like it's finally making headway to the east. Again, still there's this little pocket here. Again, we'll get into the details. I won't talk about it now. And again, this chart, upper ocean heat anomalies, really what this is a proxy for what's going on. It's all the temperatures down to 300 meters from the West Pacific to the East Pacific, going down time here. So a Kelvin wave, you can literally see a Kelvin wave in November, upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave cycle, cool water boiling up off of Ecuador. And then here we got into this year, 2015, first Kelvin wave in the spring, next Kelvin wave in the May-June timeframe. And these two Kelvin waves have created all the warm water that's pretty much associated with this El Nino now. And now finally the third Kelvin wave. And look at this. Look at, again, this is 2.5-degree anomalies, but that's averaged over down to 300 meters and 5 degrees north, 5 degrees south of the equator. So temperatures are actually much warmer. 6 degrees is what we're seeing, and it was probably 7 degrees at one point. That is finally starting to make headway. Here was the upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave cycle, finally making headway into the Galapagos, but it was also, it's been erupting in this area as well. Also, note right here, another little warm pocket starting to show. I don't know if basically a 3-pixel pocket really constitutes something to get excited about. And also notice here, this little bit here, warm water working its way back, not to the west, but this suggests that maybe already from westerly winds, Kelvin wave number 4 is starting to organize. We'll see what happens in the coming weeks. All right, finally, we've talked about westerly winds in this area, create Kelvin waves. We've looked at the subsurface profile, looked at Kelvin waves, Kelvin wave number 3 moving to the east. Now here is what's going on at the surface. Low-res imagery, clearly a very pronounced El Nino signal at the surface, going the whole way to the date line. Warm anomalies in this whole area. This is the classic El Nino signal here. The Nino 1.2 right here. This is different areas that they monitor. Nino 3 goes off into here. Nino 3.4 goes from 170 to 120 and 5 degrees north and south of the equator. So what one does to measure the strength of El Nino is figure out all the temperature in every grid square in this area and then come up with the actual average temperature, and we'll get into that in a minute. Anyway, low-res picture looking pretty good. Let's put this into perspective. Here is last year at this time. Again, it was warm, but nothing striking, trying to get organized. Let's go to the year before that, 2013. Certainly nothing that was El Nino. If anything, a very weak La Nina signal. So where we are now is looking much, much better. Here's the high-res image. We like this. The scale's a little bit different. It's broken out with distinct color shades by degree. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pockets of 4-degree anomalies. Some of those, like there and there, almost appear to have 5-degree little cores inside of them. And even out here, so this is getting much better because last week it was not as defined as this. So let's take a look. Here is this week. Here is last week. You can see there were pockets, not as defined here. Just the whole pattern generally wasn't as defined. Now you see more pockets. Here's the other thing to look at. Okay, so let's go out here around the date line, specifically this region right in here. Watch this. We'll do this. Boom. More warming here and in here. We'll go back and forth. You can see it. This is important because you have to have warm anomalies, not just here. I mean, actually, Nino 3.4 doesn't even start till here. It's this warm water gets caught by the trade, starts working its way off here. Or if the trades die, warm water that's here, there's less mixing and temperatures just start warming. So the 27th to here, a much warmer pattern out this way. We'll get into the details. We'll try to do this quick, but here we go. Nino 1.2 region, Galapagos right here, Ecuador here. Look at this, very warm anomalies. We see these pockets. These are, what are these, 4+. Again, notice the scale doesn't cut it out. It puts it in bunches, 4-degree bunches, which we're not real fond of. But anyway, you get a sense of where the warmth is. Let's go back a week. You can see there was none of that, and there was this cool pocket here, and the overall even 2-degree, 2.25 anomalies were kind of fragmented. Much more solid pattern looking now in Nino 1.2. And then we move the next tile off to the east. Galapagos are over here. Again, very solid 2+ degree anomalies the whole way. And again, from 5, which would be about here, 5 north to 5 south, looking very solid. Let's go back a week ago. Look at this. Notice the sparseness in this region. We have our 2 pockets there a week ago, but the sparseness here, now we go here, all filled in, and these pockets are building again, back and forth, back and forth. Very much improved pattern in 1 week. We suspect this is a lot due to the westerly wind burst that's occurring over the West Pacific, but also we believe trades that were in this area have backed off. That's reducing surface chop, mixing, and allowing the Kelvin wave to fully manifest itself at the surface. And then the close inspection out to the date line. Warm anomalies almost making it to the date line. Let's go back a week ago. Notice how weak temperatures were here. Now here we are. Very much better, improved pattern. Again, back and forth, back and forth. Things looking much better in all regions this week. And we can see that in the actual Nino 1.2 index in the East Pacific by the Galapagos. Notice temperatures way up now, up to 2.5. Again, here was the peak at 3 back in the July timeframe from a previous Kelvin wave erupting. We are finally getting some signal here that the upwelling Kelvin wave cycle in the East has broken up. Trades have laid down, and water temperatures are starting to migrate up in between Galapagos and Ecuador. But even more important is temperatures in the Niño 3.4 region. This is where NOAA, again, this is that area between 120 west and almost the dateline 170 west, that NOAA uses to measure the actual strength of El Nino. Currently, we had a spike here of, what was that, about 2.45 degrees yesterday. Today, down a little at plus 2.367. Still very high. This is the highest the Niño 3.4 region has been so far in this El Nino cycle. Now, let's put things in perspective. About a 1.5 degree anomaly is considered a strong El Nino. You get into 2 degree anomalies and you start doing that for a month or more, and then you get up to 2.5 degree anomalies, then you're talking super El Nino area. Again, we don't know whether this is going to hold or how long it will hold, but it's a tease and definitely moving in the right direction, a major step forward. So let's put some things into perspective. Here's the current situation. Warm pockets. This is for October 4th, off of, here's the, off of Ecuador, of course, in the Nino region. Now, let's go back in history. Other super El Ninos. There's only 2 others that are in existence. Here's the image for October 4th from the 82 El Nino. Pales in comparison to where we are now. This is, again, this was a late blooming El Nino, but still, at this point in time, it was nothing compared to the El Nino that we have in play right now. Also notice it was westward displaced. There isn't even anything going on in this region relative to its formation. All of it was off the coast. It was west of the Galapagos. And then, of course, the 97 Super El Nino this time of year clearly crushes our El Nino that we have in play right now. And I'll just pull that image in here. Boom. And you can see there really isn't any comparison. But still, there's a lot more time in the game. This one was an early bloomer, an early fader. Ours is a slow bloomer, but still very solid. And again, the 82-83 El Nino was an even slower bloomer, and it reached Super El Nino status. Our guess is that this year's event is somewhere in the middle between 82-83 and 97, and that is a good place to be. I mean, the thought is this will probably reach Super El Nino status. And finally, how well coupled is this El Nino with the atmosphere? Okay, Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. The more negative and the longer running the numbers, the stronger the coupling to the atmosphere. That would mean lower pressure over Tahiti, higher pressure over Darwin. Look at these numbers. We are down to minus 49.7 yesterday, minus 46.6 today. These numbers, there was a couple of these sort of readings with the 97 El Nino. Not many, just a couple here and there if you go look in the record. So we are approaching that status now. To put things in perspective, in late December, early January, when the 97 El Nino was at its peak, there was one reading that went down to a minus 70, I believe. Anyway, the 30-day running average, minus 21. This is exactly where we want it to be. I'm looking here. Okay. Minus 21, I was looking for the previous lowest reading. I don't recall what it was off the top of my head, but roughly in that area. Also, the 90-day running average, we want to see it. At one point, it was minus 18. Then we got into this kind of funk in the September time frame. It kind of backed off, but now we're starting to dive again. We want to see it at minus 18, and we want to see it hold there, not just for a day or two, but for a month or two. It does that. Anything beyond minus 18, and basically this is a done deal in our mind. So things are looking very good. This suggests strong coupling with the atmosphere. The ESPI index, again, we'll show you here real quick, a difference in precipitation coverage. Instead of surface temperature anomalies or pressure or whatever, difference in precipitation coverage between the maritime continent and basically a larger area version of the Niño 3.4 region. Should be dry here, should be wet here. That would be the classic El Nino signal. The higher this number, the better. It's 1.95 today. The highest we've seen it is at 2.4 a while back. Again, it's been holding roughly in about the 2.0 region for a month or more. We haven't been following this index that long. So this is a really good sign. Again, Super El Nino, the 8283 was a 2.2 at its peak for a day or two. What is that? Probably a little bit longer. That probably a week or two. Okay, the 97 El Nino got to about a 2.8. So we would expect to see this number rising, especially after this coming westerly wind burst gets going. We get into the fall. We expect things to really start kicking off here. And finally, the multivariable index. We've seen this before. It has not updated. It should update probably Monday. We're guessing that's tomorrow. But anyway, compared to where we are, the 97 El Nino was up here at a 3. The 8283 El Nino got to a 3. We're right at this point in time here in September, midway between the two. We expect this number to tick up. Maybe not. It might actually go flat given that we were pretty much dead here for a month. But sometime we expect, since our El Nino is probably not as robust or not as aggressive as the 97 El Nino, but not as slow-moving as the 82, 83. We would expect to see it peak somewhere in here, and we got plenty of time to get there, and things are definitely on the right track. And finally, the forecast for the Niño 3.4 region. There's some interesting stuff going on here. So currently, it showed, a 1.85 roughly was the peak. It's dipped a little bit in October. Now it's coming back. But here's the interesting. See the blue runs here? These are the latest forecast members. They're starting to trend upwards towards the 2 region. This is PDF corrected, so we would consider this the conservative estimate. And it's showing an upward trend here. And this is just one model. This is a CFS version 2, but a reasonably good model. And so the projection is that perhaps, given the westerly wind burst that's going on. Now consider this. If that westerly wind burst happens over the next couple of weeks, it'll take 2.5 to 3 months for it to actually reach Ecuador. So what would that be? We're, let's say, mid-October to November, December. End of December, it would reach there, and it would take another month to advect back over into the Niño 3.4 region. So we're talking into the end of January timeframe. I would not be surprised to see this portion of the curve start working its way up if things play out as forecast. And here's the uncorrected version. It's showing we're at, 2.1 or 2.2, but this actually goes back a little bit, with a peak up at around 2.4. And notice this one is exhibiting the same thing. The latest members are pushing up into the 2.6, almost 2.7 range, and going out into January now. So clearly, a improving pattern is setting up. So let's wrap this all up. Current situation, jet stream looking good in the North Pacific. Low pressure trying to get going in the Gulf of Alaska. Not really getting any traction yet. We suspect that's just a matter of time. The jet stream is continuing to look solid. In the meantime, small southern hemi swell is looking likely. In fact, there's 3 pulses already in the water. And the latest storm over the weekend had 53-foot seas aimed at us. Not for a long period of time, but good enough. That'll be a good holdover swell, certainly for Southern California up into Northern California and Hawaii, while we wait for the North Pacific to fully come online. Meanwhile, El Nino continues to build, looking very good the past couple of days. Another westerly wind burst, westerly winds building. Major westerly wind burst projected starting about a week out. The Kelvin wave number 3, very strong, is starting to erupt solidly in the Niño 1.2 region and west of the Galapagos. Temperatures in the Niño 3.4 region are on the way up, and it looks like we're just going to continue to move forward from here. Finally, a big pulse is appearing to be in play. This is great news. And so from here on out, it looks like it's just a matter of time till we really start seeing some effects of this El Nino. And we would like to be able to say it's going to be a super El Nino. We're not sure yet, but all the signs are starting to fall into place. So that's it for this week. We'll do it again next week, same time, same channel. Enjoy. Thanks for watching.